In the shadowed halls of Ashford Manor, a golden envelope holds a secret that could ruin lives. Sound of a scream. Hercule Poirot, the master of mysteries, arrives to guard it, but a midnight scream, a hidden passage, and a vanishing guest plunge him into a web of deception. Quick flashes, a muddy footprint, a torn note, a flickering candle. Was it greed, jealousy, or betrayal? As clues unravel, Poirot's little grey cells face their greatest test. Who dares to defy the truth? Chapter 1. The Curious Invitation. The morning sun filtered through the heavy drapes of Hercule Poirot's London flat, casting a soft glow over the meticulous order of his sitting room. Every surface gleamed with the precision of a man who valued symmetry above all else. Books aligned on the mahogany shelves, the silver coffee service polished to a mirror's sheen, and the small porcelain figurines arranged with geometric exactitude on the mantelpiece. Poirot himself, diminutive yet commanding, sat at his ormolu writing desk, his neatly manicured fingers adjusting the angle of a fountain pen. He was savoring a tisane, its delicate aroma of chamomile and mint rising in faint wisps, when the door opened with the quiet efficiency that marked the presence of his valet, George. "Pardon, sir," George said, his voice a model of decorum, "but a letter has arrived for you. By special courier, no less." He extended a silver tray, upon which rested a single envelope. Its golden hue caught the light, shimmering like a rare artifact unearthed from some forgotten vault. Poirot's sharp green eyes narrowed, his mustache giving the faintest twitch of curiosity. In a world of cream vellum and wax seals, a golden envelope was no ordinary missive. It was a statement, a provocation even, and Poirot was not a man to ignore such gestures. He took the envelope, noting its weight substantial, yet not ostentatious. The paper was of the finest quality, its texture smooth as silk, and the address, written in a bold, flowing script, bore his name, Monsieur Hercule Poirot. There was no return address, only a crimson wax seal embossed with an intricate cresta lion rampant entwined with ivy. Poirot's fingers, deft as a surgeon's, broke the seal with care, revealing a single sheet of matching gold paper. The message was concise, penned in the same elegant hand. "Dear Monsieur Poirot, your reputation as a man of unparalleled discretion and intellect precedes you. I find myself in need of such qualities. Pray, do me the honour of joining me at Ashford Manor, Gloucestershire, this coming weekend, from Friday to Sunday. A matter of utmost delicacy requires your presence. I shall say no more here, save that your attendance would be a service to one who values order as much as you. A car will collect you at 10 a.m. on Friday. Yours sincerely." Sir Reginald Ashford Poirot leaned back in his chair, the letter resting lightly in his hand. Sir Reginald Ashford, a name not unknown to him. The industrialist, knighted for his contributions to Britain's wartime steel production, was a man of wealth and influence, though whispers of ruthlessness trailed him like a shadow. His estate, Ashford Manor, was said to be a monument to his success, a Georgian masterpiece set amidst the rolling hills of the Cotswolds. Yet it was the phrase utmost delicacy that stirred Poirot's little grey cells. Such words, in his experience, often cloaked secrets of a darker hue, secrets of greed, betrayal, or worse. "George," Poirot said, his voice measured, "what know you of Sir Reginald Ashford?" George, ever prepared, inclined his head slightly. "A gentleman of considerable means, sir, owns Ashford Steel and several subsidiaries. Married to Lady Beatrice Ashford, Knee Harcourt, some 10 years his junior. They say he's a hard man, in business, sir, but generous to his friends. There's talk of a political ambition, though nothing confirmed. Poirot nodded, his eyes returning to the letter. And this manner of his, a fine estate, sir, by all accounts. Georgian, with gardens designed by Capability Brown himself. Remote, though nearest village, is a good 5 miles off. They say it's a place for grand parties, but Sir Reginald's been keeping to himself of late. Some trouble, perhaps, though the papers haven't got wind of it. Trouble, Poirot murmured, his fingers brushing the edge of the golden envelope. That is precisely what interests me. He rose, his movements precise, and crossed to the window, parting the drapes to gaze at the bustling London street below. The world outside moved in its chaotic rhythm, but within these walls, Poirot's mind was a machine of order, already turning over the possibilities. A man like Sir Reginald did not summon Hercule Poirot for trivialities. This was no mere social invitation. It was a prelude to a mystery. By Friday morning, Poirot was ready. His suitcase, packed with the meticulous care of a man who believed in the sanctity of a well-pressed suit, contained precisely what was needed for a weekend in the country: 2 suits of impeccable cut, a selection of starched shirts, and his favorite silver-backed brushes. George, with his usual efficiency, ensured the flat was in order before Poirot stepped into the sleek black Rolls-Royce that awaited him. The driver, a taciturn man in livery, offered no conversation, which suited Poirot perfectly. He preferred to let his thoughts wander, piecing together the fragments of what he knew about Sir Reginald and this matter of utmost delicacy. The journey to Gloucestershire was a study in contrasts. London's clamour gave way to the serene greens of the countryside, where hedgerows and stone walls marked the passage of time in centuries rather than minutes. Poirot, ever observant, noted the driver's careful handling of the car, the way his eyes flicked to the rearview mirror with a hint of vigilance. Was it merely professional caution, or did the man know more than he let on? Poirot filed the observation away, as he did all such details. For later consideration, Ashford Manor came into view as the car crested a hill, its honey-coloured stone glowing in the late morning light. The house was a masterpiece of symmetry, its Palladian facade flanked by manicured lawns and a fountain that sparkled like liquid crystal. Yet there was something in its grandeur that struck Poirot as almost too perfect, as if the manor itself were a stage set for some unseen drama. The car crunched to a halt on the gravel drive, and Poirot stepped out, his patent leather shoes gleaming against the stones. Sir Reginald himself awaited at the entrance, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 50s, his hair silvering at the temples but his posture unyielding. His handshake was firm, his eyes searching Poirot's with an intensity that bordered on desperation. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice resonant with authority, "I cannot tell you what it means to have you here. Your reputation is, if I may say, a beacon in troubled times." "You flatter me, Sir Reginald," Poirot replied, his tone polite but probing. "But it is not flattery that brings me here, I think. You spoke of a matter delicate. Sir Reginald's smile faltered, a crack in his polished demeanour. "All in good time, Monsieur Poirot. First, allow me to introduce you to my wife and our guests." He gestured toward the grand hall, where a woman in a dove-grey dress awaited. Lady Beatrice Ashford was a striking figure, her auburn hair swept into an elegant chignon, her eyes a pale blue that seemed to hold 1,000 unspoken thoughts. Her smile, though warm, carried a trace of strain. as if the act of hosting were a burden she bore with effort. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, extending a gloved hand, "we are honored. Sir Reginald speaks so highly of you." Poirot bowed, his eyes never leaving her face. "The honor is mine, Lady Beatrice. A house such as this is a setting most magnific for a weekend." She laughed, a brittle sound, and turned to lead him into the drawing room, where the other guests were assembled. The room was a study in opulence, crystal chandeliers, velvet upholstery, and a roaring fire that cast flickering shadows on the walls. 4 figures turned to greet him, each distinct in manner and appearance, yet all sharing a certain wariness, as if they too sensed the undercurrent of unease. First was Dr. Evelyn Carter, a woman in her early 40s, her dark hair pulled back severely, her eyes sharp behind gold-rimmed spectacles. An archaeologist of some renown, she carried herself with the confidence of one accustomed to commanding attention, though her handshake was cool, almost dismissive. "I've heard of you, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice crisp. "You're the man who sees what others miss." "Perhaps," Poirot replied, his smile enigmatic. "But it is the little things, Doctor, that often tell the loudest stories." Next was Victor Langston, a financier whose brash demeanor seemed at odds with the room's refinement. His suit, though expensive, was slightly ill-fitting, as if he wore wealth like an ill-tailored costume. His handshake was too firm, his grin too wide. "Pleasure to meet a legend, Poirot," he said, his voice booming. "Reginald says you're the best. Hope you're not here to dig into my affairs." The laugh that followed was forced, and Poirot noted the slight sheen of perspiration on Langston's brow. Miss Clara Wentworth, a novelist barely out of her 20s, was a contrast in every way. Her delicate frame and wide, dreamy eyes gave her the air of a romantic heroine, yet there was a sharpness in her gaze that suggested a keen observer. "Monsieur Poirot," she said softly, her voice tinged with a West Country lilt, "I've read about your cases. They're like something out of my novel's only reel. Life, mademoiselle, is often more fantastic than fiction," Poirot said, his eyes lingering on her trembling fingers. Was it nerves, or something more? Finally, Colonel Hugh Ramsay, a retired military man with a ruddy complexion and a mustache that rivaled Poirot's own, offered a curt nod. "Good to meet you, sir," he said, his voice clipped. "Heard you've a knack for sorting out messes. Hope you're up to it." His eyes, bloodshot from too much brandy, darted towards Sir Reginald, and Poirot sensed a history unspoken. The introductions complete, Lady Beatrice ushered them to the dining room, where a luncheon of cold meats, fresh bread, and a fine claret awaited. The conversation was polite but strained, each guest navigating the unspoken tension that hung over the table like a storm cloud. Sir Reginald spoke of the manor's history, of its tapestries and paintings, but his words felt rehearsed, his glances toward Poirot frequent and pointed. Lady Beatrice, meanwhile, toyed with her napkin, her eyes flitting between her husband and the guests as if searching for an unseen threat. It was over coffee, served in delicate Sevres cups, that Sir Reginald finally broached the reason for Poirot's presence. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice lowering, "I have asked you here because I face a situation most delicate. There is a document, one of great importance, that I wish you to safeguard during your stay. I cannot say more now, not with," he paused, his eyes sweeping the table, "not with so many ears about. Suffice it to say, your discretion is paramount." Poirot inclined his head, his expression unreadable. You may rely upon Hercule Poirot, Sir Reginald. But, tell me, this document is one that others might desire. We. Sir Reginald's jaw tightened. It is possible. That is why I trust only you to keep it secure until Sunday, when I will resolve the matter. The table fell silent, the guests' eyes fixed on their host or their plates, each face a mask of curiosity or unease. Poirot sipped his coffee, its bitterness a sharp counterpoint to the sweetness of his thoughts. A document of importance, a host on edge, guests with secrets of their own. This was no ordinary weekend. The golden envelope, he suspected, was merely the beginning. As the meal concluded, Poirot excused himself to his room, a spacious chamber overlooking the gardens. He locked the door, his movements deliberate, and placed his suitcase on the bed. From it, he withdrew a small leather notebook, its pages blank but soon to be filled with the observations of his keen mind. He sat at the desk, the golden envelope retrieved from his coat before him. It was not the same envelope, he noted, but one he had brought from London. A precaution in case Sir Reginald's fears were well-founded. The original remained in his flat, safe in George's care. He opened his notebook and began to write. Sir Reginald Ashford, nervous, secretive. Lady Beatrice, strained, watchful. Dr. Carticle, perhaps too composed. Langston Brash, hiding something. Miss Wentworth, nervous, observant. Colonel Ramsay Gruff, evasive. Each name was a piece in a puzzle, each gesture a clue to a larger truth. Poirot's pen paused, his eyes narrowing. The creak of a floorboard outside his door, faint but unmistakable, broke the silence. He rose, silent as a cat, and approached the door, his hand resting on the knob. The sound did not repeat, but Poirot's instincts told him he was not alone. He returned to his desk, his mind alight with possibilities. The golden envelope, the document, the guests, they were all threads in a tapestry yet to be woven. Poirot, with his little grey cells, would unravel them, as he always did, but for now he would watch, listen, and wait. The game, as he so often said, was afoot. Chapter 2. Arrival at Ashford Manor. The Rolls-Royce glided through the verdant folds of the Cotswolds, its engine a low purr against the symphony of birdsong and rustling leaves. Hercule Poirot sat erect in the back, his gloved hands folded neatly over the silver head of his cane, his eyes absorbing every detail of the passing landscape. The hedgerows, clipped with military precision, and the occasional glimpse of a stone cottage spoke of an England timeless yet fragile, as if the very countryside held its breath in anticipation of secrets yet to unfold. The driver, a man of few words named Harris, maintained a stoic silence, his gloved hands steady on the wheel, though Poirot noted the faint tightening of his jaw whenever the road curved sharply. A man accustomed to control, perhaps, or one burdened by knowledge he dared not share. As the car ascended a gentle rise, Ashford Manor came into view, its golden stone facade glowing like a beacon against the emerald expanse of its grounds. The house was a triumph of Georgian architecture, its symmetrical windows and pedimented entrance exuding an air of unassailable dignity. Yet Poirot, whose mind was as attuned to the subtleties of human nature as to the aesthetics of design, sensed an undercurrent of unease in the manor's perfection. The fountain at the center of the gravel drive sparkled too brightly, the roses lining the path bloomed too vividly, as if the estate itself were compensating for some hidden flaw. The car crunched to a halt, and Harris opened the door with a deferential nod. Poirot stepped out, his patent leather shoes gleaming against the pale gravel, and adjusted his Homburg hat with a precise tilt. Before him stood Sir Reginald Ashford, his broad frame filling the doorway like a sentinel. His face, weathered yet handsome, bore the marks of a man who had wrested success from the jaws of adversity, though his eyes grey and piercing betrayed a flicker of disquiet. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, striding forward with a hand outstretched, "you are most welcome. Your presence does us great honor." Poirot inclined his head, his moustache curving in a polite smile. "The honor, Sir Reginald, is mine. A house such as this is a setting worthy of the great dramas, Nan." Sir Reginald's laugh was hearty but brief, like a fire that flared and died too quickly. "You've a poet's eye, Monsieur Poirot. Come, let me introduce you to my wife." He gestured toward the grand oak doors, where a woman emerged, her movements graceful yet tinged with a certain hesitance. Lady Beatrice Ashford was a vision in a tailored dress of soft lavender, her auburn hair swept into an elegant knot that accentuated the delicate lines of her neck. Her eyes, a pale blue that seemed to shimmer with unshed thoughts, met Poirot's with a smile that was both warm and fragile, like porcelain on the verge of cracking. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low and melodic, "we are so pleased. You could join us. Reginald has spoken of little else since your acceptance." Her gloved hand, extended in greeting, trembled ever so slightly, and Poirot, ever the observer, noted the faint tightening of her lips as she spoke her husband's name. "Madame Poirot," replied, bowing over her hand, "it is a pleasure to be in such charming company. Your home, it is magnifica, testament to order and beauty." Lady Beatrice's smile wavered, and she turned to lead them inside. The entrance hall was a marvel of grandeur, a marble floor inlaid with a geometric pattern, a chandelier dripping with crystal, and walls adorned with portraits of stern-faced Ashfords gazing down with proprietary zeal. Yet Poirot's attention was drawn not to the opulence, but to the small details: a scuff on the baseboard, a vase slightly askew, a maid's hurried glance as she passed with a tray. These were the imperfections that whispered of truths hidden beneath the manor's polished surface. They proceeded to the drawing-room, where the other guests awaited, their voices a low hum against the crackle of a fire in the massive hearth. The room was a study in contrasts. Heavy velvet drapes framed tall windows that let in slants of sunlight, while the furniture Chippendale chairs, a rosewood table, spoke of wealth tempered by restraint. 4 figures turned as Poirot entered, their expressions ranging from curiosity to guarded appraisal, as if each weighed the significance of his arrival. Sir Reginald made the introductions with the practiced ease of a host, though his voice carried a trace of strain. "Monsieur Poirot, allow me to present Dr. Evelyn Carter, a distinguished archaeologist and a friend of long standing." Dr. Carter, a woman of striking presence, stepped forward. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes, magnified slightly by gold-rimmed spectacles, gleamed with intellect and a hint of defiance. She wore a tailored suit of forest green, its cut practical yet elegant, and her handshake was firm, almost challenging. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice crisp as autumn leaves, "I've read of your exploits. You have a reputation for unmasking the truth, no matter how deeply buried." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "The truth, Doctor, is like one of your artifacts. It requires only the right tools to uncover. I trust we shall have much to discuss." Next was Victor Langston, a man whose brash confidence seemed to fill the room like a gust of wind. His suit, though costly, strained at the shoulders, and his tie was a shade too garish for the setting. His face, broad and ruddy, bore the marks of a man who lived loudly, and his handshake was a crushing affair, as if he sought to assert dominance. In a single grip, Poirot, is it, he boomed, his grin revealing teeth too perfect to be natural. Reginald's been singing your praises. Hope you're not here to poke into my ledgers. His laugh was loud, but his eyes darted to Sir Reginald, a flicker of unease beneath the bravado. Monsieur Langston, Poirot said smoothly, I am interested only in what is presented to me. The ledgers, they are safe for now. His tone was light, but the financier's smile faltered, and Poirot noted the sheen of perspiration on his brow. Miss Clara Wentworth, the youngest of the group, stood by the window, her slight frame silhouetted against the light. Her dress, a soft muslin in pale rose, gave her the air of a figure from a pre-Raphaelite painting, but her eyes wide and hazel held a sharpness that belied her delicate appearance. She clasped a small notebook, her fingers betraying a faint tremble as she extended her hand. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice soft but clear, I'm a novelist, and your cases are the stuff of my dreams. I hope I shan't disappoint you by being too ordinary. Poirot smiled, his mustache curving upward. Mademoiselle, there is nothing ordinary about a mind that creates worlds. I suspect you see more than you say. Finally, Colonel Hugh Ramsay, a barrel-chested man with a face reddened by years of sun and spirits, offered a curt nod. His tweed suit smelled faintly of tobacco, and his mustache, a bristling counterpart to Poirot's own, twitched as he spoke. Poirot, he said, his voice gruff, heard you're a clever sort. We'll see if you can keep up with this lot. His eyes, bloodshot but keen, flicked toward the other guests, and Poirot sensed a man who trusted few and suspected many. With the introductions complete, Lady Beatrice invited them to the dining room for luncheon. The table was set with Wedgwood, china and silver cutlery, a centerpiece of hothouse roses, adding a touch of warmth to the formal setting. The meal consomme, followed by poached salmon and asparagus, was served with quiet efficiency by a staff who moved like shadows, their presence felt but scarcely noticed. Poirot, seated to Sir Reginald's right, observed the interplay among the guests with the precision of a watchmaker. Dr. Carter spoke of her recent excavations in Egypt, her tone authoritative but guarded when Sir Reginald pressed her on funding. Langston boasted of a deal in the city, his voice loud enough to drown out Clara's quiet remarks about her novel. Colonel Ramsay, nursing a glass of claret, interjected with tales of his campaigns in India, though his anecdotes seemed chosen to deflect rather than enlighten. Lady Beatrice, presiding at the foot of the table, was a study in composure, yet Poirot noted the way her fingers twisted the stem of her wineglass, the slight hesitation before she responded to her husband's queries. Sir Reginald, for his part, maintained a facade of geniality, but his eyes returned often to Poirot as if seeking reassurance. The conversation turned to the weekend's plancé tour of the gardens. A game of bridge, but Poirot sensed an undercurrent, a tension that pulsed beneath the polite exchanges like a hidden current dot. As dessert, a delicate lemon soufflé was served, Sir Reginald leaned toward Poirot, his voice low. Monsieur Poirot, I shall speak plainly. There is a matter, a document, that I must entrust to you. It is of such sensitivity that I dare not keep it myself. I ask that you guard it until Sunday, when I shall conclude certain arrangements. Poirot's eyes met his, unblinking. A document, you say, and it is one that others might covet. Sir Reginald's jaw tightened, his voice barely a whisper. It could ruin reputations, perhaps more. I trust you, Poirot, to to keep it safe. The table fell silent, the guests' eyes darting toward their host, some with curiosity, others with unease. Poirot sipped his coffee, its bitterness a fitting prelude to the task ahead. "You have my word, Sir Reginald," he said, his tone calm but resolute. "Hercule Poirot does not fail in matters of trust." As the meal ended, Poirot excused himself to his room, a spacious chamber on the second floor with a view of the formal gardens. He locked the door, his movements deliberate, and opened his suitcase to retrieve his leather notebook. In it, he jotted his observations. Sir Reginald urgent, secretive. Lady Beatrice nervous, perhaps fearful. Dr. Carter guarded, ambitious. Langston overconfident, anxious. Miss Wentworth sensitive, observant. Colonel Ramsay defensive, watchful. Each name was a thread in a tapestry yet to be woven, each glance a clue to a mystery unfolding. He stood at the window, gazing at the gardens below, where a gardener trimmed a hedge with meticulous care. The manor was a world unto itself, yet Poirot knew that within its walls secrets simmered, waiting to be uncovered. The golden envelope, he suspected, was but the first act in a drama that would test his little grey cells to their fullest. Chapter 3. The golden envelope appears, the morning sun-bathed Ashford Manor in a golden haze, its rays filtering through the tall windows of the library where Hercule Poirot stood, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes sweeping the room with the precision of a surveyor. The library was a sanctuary of knowledge and wealth, its oak-panelled walls lined with leather-bound volumes, their spines embossed with gilt titles that whispered of centuries past. A long mahogany table dominated the centre, its surface polished to a mirror's sheen, and above it hung a chandelier, its prisms scattering light like fragments of a shattered star. Yet Poirot's attention was drawn not to the grandeur, but to the subtle discordances. A book slightly askew on a shelf, a faint scratch on the table's edge, the lingering scent of cigar smoke that clashed with the room's pristine air. The guests had gathered at Sir Reginald's request, their faces a gallery of guarded expressions, as if each sensed the weight of the moment. Sir Reginald stood at the head of the table, his broad shoulders squared, his silver hair catching the light like a halo. Lady Beatrice sat to his right, her lavender dress replaced by a navy ensemble that seemed to armor her fragility. Dr. Evelyn Carter, her spectacles glinting, occupied a chair near the window, her posture rigid as she clutched a notebook. Victor Langston lounged with forced nonchalance, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm on the table. Miss Clara Wentworth, her notebook replaced by a single pencil, sat with her hands folded, her hazel eyes darting between her host and the door. Colonel Hugh Ramsay, his tweed suit rumpled from a morning walk, stood by the fireplace, his ruddy face set in a scowl. Poirot, positioned near a bookcase, observed them all, his little grey cells humming with anticipation. Sir Reginald cleared, his throat, his voice resonant yet tinged with a tremor that betrayed his composure. "My friends," he began, his eyes sweeping the room, "I have called you here for a purpose most grave. Monsieur Poirot, as you know, is a man of unmatched discretion, and it is to him I now turn." From his breast pocket, he produced a golden envelope, its surface shimmering like a beacon in the morning light. The crimson wax seal, embossed with the Ashford crest, gleamed with an almost defiant intensity. "This," Sir Reginald continued, holding the envelope aloft, "contains a document of such consequence that its safety is paramount. It is a matter that could alter lives, ruin reputations, and shake the foundations of trust." His voice dropped, and he fixed each guest with a piercing gaze. "I entrust it to Monsieur Poirot to guard until Sunday, when its contents will be addressed." A murmur rippled through the room, though none spoke. Poirot stepped forward, his movements deliberate, and accepted the envelope with a slight bow. "Sir Reginald," he said, his voice calm but resonant, "you place in me a trust most solemn. Hercule Poirot will ensure this document's safety." He slipped the envelope into his coat pocket, his fingers brushing the smooth paper, noting its weight and texture. The room seemed to exhale, but the tension remained, coiled like a spring. Lady Beatrice's lips parted as if to speak, but she closed them, her fingers twisting the sapphire ring on her left hand. Dr. Carter's eyes narrowed behind her spectacles, her pen poised over her notebook as if to record the moment. Langston's drumming ceased, his grin replaced by a tight-lipped stare. Clara's pencil rolled from her grasp, clattering softly on the table, and she flushed, retrieving it with trembling hands. Colonel Ramsay snorted, his moustache twitching, and muttered something about damned theatrics. Though his eyes never left the envelope, Poirot's mind catalogued each reaction, each gesture, as pieces in a puzzle yet to be assembled. The envelope, he suspected, was more than was a catalyst, a spark that would ignite the hidden motives of those present. "If you will excuse me," he said, his tone polite but firm, "I shall secure this in my room. Order and safety, they are my watchwords." As the guests dispersed, Poirot made his way upstairs, his steps measured, his cane tapping a soft rhythm on the polished floor. His room, with its view of the gardens, was, as he had left it, the bed made with military precision, the curtains drawn to admit just enough light. He opened the small safe in the wardrobe, its combination known only to him, and placed the golden envelope inside, locking it with a satisfying click. Yet, as he closed the wardrobe door, a faint sound reached his ears, a creak, not of the house settling, but of a footstep in the corridor. He paused, his hand resting on the wardrobe, and listened. Silence followed, but Poirot's instincts, honed by years of unraveling human deceit, told him he was not alone. He returned to the library for tea, where the guests had reconvened there. Conversation a brittle veneer over the morning's events. Dr. Carter spoke of an Egyptian artifact, a scarab of lapis lazuli, her voice crisp but her eyes distant. Langston regaled the group with a tale of a stock market coup, his laughter too loud, his gestures too broad. Clara, quieter now, sketched idly in her notebook, her pencil tracing lines that seemed to mirror the room's tension. Colonel Ramsay, nursing a brandy despite the early hour, grumbled about the state of the nation, his words slurring slightly. Lady Beatrice, presiding over the tea tray, poured with a steadiness that belied the faint tremor in her hands. Poirot sipped his tea all grey, perfectly brewed, and observed. The golden envelope, though absent, loomed over the room like a spectre. He noted Langston's frequent glances toward the door, as if expecting an interruption. Clara's sketches, when he glimpsed them, were not of flowers or landscapes, but of angular shapes, perhaps a code or a map. Dr. Carter's notebook, he saw, contained not notes but diagrams, their purpose unclear. Colonel Ramsay's brandy glass, refilled twice, suggested a man seeking refuge from his thoughts. And Lady Beatrice, her eyes met Poirot's once, fleetingly, and in them he saw a flicker of fear, or perhaps guilt. As the afternoon waned, Poirot excused himself for a walk in the gardens, his cane sinking slightly into the soft earth. The formal beds, with their roses and lavender, were a triumph of order. Yet he noticed a single rose bush, its petals scattered as if disturbed by a careless hand. He knelt, his eyes scanning the soil, and found a faint imprint, not a footprint, but the edge of a shoe, its heel worn unevenly. A clue, perhaps, though its meaning was yet to be divined. Returning to the manor, Poirot joined the guests for dinner, a formal affair in the dining room, where candlelight cast shadows that danced like conspirators. Sir Reginald, at the head of the table, spoke of the manor's history, his voice steady but his eyes restless. Lady Beatrice, opposite him, maintained her composure, though her fork trembled as she lifted it. The conversation turned to the document, though none dared mention it directly. Dr. Carter spoke of secrets buried in ancient tombs, her tone implying a parallel to the present. Langston joked about the value of information, his eyes lingering on Poirot's pocket. Clara, unusually silent, pushed her food around her plate, while Colonel Ramsay, emboldened by wine, hinted at espionage, his words vague but pointed. As the meal ended, Poirot rose, his expression serene. "A fine evening, Mies Amos," he said, "but I must retire to ensure all is in order." He ascended to his room, his mind a whirl of observations. The golden envelope, secure in the safe, was the key to the mystery. But its true significance lay not in its contents, but in the desires it awakened. Someone, he knew, would act before the weekend was out. He locked his door, checked the safe once more, and sat at the desk, his notebook open. In it, he wrote, "The envelope a lure, a test. Sir Reginald plays a dangerous game. Lady Beatrice hides her fear. Dr. Carter conceals her purpose. Langston masks his greed. Clara observes too much. Ramsay drinks to forget. The creak in the corridor who watches Hercule Poirot." The night was still, but Poirot's little grey cells were not. The stage was set, the players assembled, and the golden envelope, like a spark in a powder keg, would soon ignite the truth. Chapter 4. A midnight disturbance. The clock in Hercule Poirot's room struck midnight. Its chimes, a soft but insistent reminder of time's relentless march. The manor was cloaked in silence, the kind that amplifies every creak and whisper, as if the house itself were holding its breath. Poirot, seated at the small writing desk, his notebook open before him, was not asleep. His mind, ever active, sifted through the day's observations, the golden envelope, Sir Reginald's guarded words, the guests' veiled glances. The safe, concealed within the wardrobe, held its precious charge, and Poirot had checked it thrice before retiring, his fingers lingering on the cool metal as if to assure himself of its security. Yet sleep eluded him, for the air of Ashford Manor was thick with unspoken secrets, and Poirot's little grey cells sensed a storm brewing. At precisely 17 a.m., the silence shattered. A scream, high and piercing, cut through the night, its echo ricocheting down the corridors like a gunshot. Poirot was on his feet in an instant, his dressing gown donned with the swift precision of a man accustomed to emergencies. He seized his cane not for support, but as a potential weapon, and unlocked his door, stepping into the darkened hallway. The scream had come from the direction of the library, and as he moved toward the grand staircase, other doors opened, disgorging the guests in various states of disarray. Lady Beatrice was first, her nightgown hastily covered by a silk shawl, her face pale as moonlight. "What was that?" she gasped, her hands clutching the shawl as if it were a lifeline. Sir Reginald followed, his hair dishevelled, his eyes wide with alarm. "Beatrice, stay back," he barked, though his voice trembled. "Dr. Evelyn Carter." emerged, her spectacles askew, a heavy book clutched to her chest as if it might shield her. Victor Langston, in a garish red dressing gown, swore under his breath, his usual bravado replaced by a nervous energy. Miss Clara Wentworth, her hair loose and her eyes wide with fear, clung to the doorframe of her room. Colonel Hugh Ramsay, last to appear, staggered slightly, the scent of brandy clinging to him like a second skin. Monsieur Poirot, Sir Reginald said, his voice hoarse, what in God's name is happening? Poirot raised a hand, his eyes scanning the corridor. Calm yourselves, Mies, Amos. We shall discover the cause. To the library, if you please. His tone was steady, commanding, and the group followed. Their footsteps a chaotic counterpoint to the manor's stillness. The library door stood ajar, a sliver of moonlight spilling onto the marble floor of the hall. Poirot pushed it open, his cane tapping softly as he entered. The room was as he had left it that afternoon, save for one stark anomaly on the mahogany table. Illuminated by a shaft of moonlight, lay a golden envelope, its crimson seal broken, its contents gone. The sight was a jolt to Poirot's senses, for he knew beyond doubt that the envelope he had secured in his room's safe was the true one. This, then, was a decoy, a brazen challenge to his vigilance. Lady Beatrice gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The envelope. It's been opened. Her voice broke, and she swayed, steadied only by Sir Reginald's arm. The other guests crowded behind, their faces a tableau of shock and suspicion. Poirot stepped forward, his eyes never leaving the envelope, and lifted it with gloved fingers, noting its weight lighter than the one in his possession. Confirming his suspicion, Sir Reginald Poirot said, his voice low but piercing, "This is not the envelope you entrusted to me, that remains secure in my room. This is a fabrication, placed here to provoke or deceive. But by whom, and to what end?" Sir Reginald's face drained of colour, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Not yours. Then the document, it's gone." His voice rose, a note of panic breaking through his usual control. "It contains details of a financial scandal, Monsieur Poirot, matter that could ruin a man of great influence. I trusted you." Poirot's moustache twitched, his eyes narrowing. "Calm yourself, Sir Reginald. The true document is safe. But this," he held up the empty envelope, "this is a clue, a piece of the puzzle. Someone wishes us to believe. The secret is exposed. We must discover why." Dr. Carter stepped forward, her spectacles glinting in the dim light. "This is absurd," she said, her voice sharp. "If the real envelope is safe, why this charade? Someone is playing a dangerous game." Her eyes flicked to Langston, who bristled under her gaze. "Don't look at me, Evelyn," Langston snapped, his hands balling into fists. "I was in my room, sleeping like a decent man. Ask the Colonel, he was snoring loud enough to wake." "The dead," Ramsay snorted, his bloodshot eyes narrowing. "Watch your tongue, Langston. I heard the scream, same as you. Came from down here, not my room." He gestured vaguely, his balance unsteady. Clara, trembling, spoke softly. "I saw nothing, Monsieur Poirot, but I heard footsteps earlier outside my door. I thought it was the staff, but now—" Her voice trailed off, her eyes wide with fear. Poirot turned to the group, his presence commanding despite his diminutive stature. "Mies, Amos, return to your rooms. Lock your doors and remain vigilant. I shall investigate this matter. No one is to leave the manor until morning." As the guests dispersed, their murmurs fading into the night. Poirot remained in the library, his mind a whirl of possibilities. He examined the envelope closely, noting the seal's jagged edges, as if broken in haste. The paper was identical to the one in his safe, suggesting access to Sir Reginald's private stationery. He paced the room, his cane tapping a slow rhythm, and stopped by the window, where a faint smudge on the sill caught his eye. Kneeling, he inspected it, a trace of wax, crimson and fresh, as if dripped from a candle. Someone had been here. In the dark, orchestrating this tableau, he returned to his room, locking the door behind him, and opened the safe. The true golden envelope lay undisturbed, its seal intact. Yet the discovery in the library gnawed at him. Why stage such a deception? Was it to test his vigilance, to distract from another crime, or to provoke a reaction from the guests? He sat at the desk, his notebook open, and wrote, "The false enveloper, bold move. Sir Reginald's panic, genuine or feigned. Lady Beatrice's fear real or calculated. Dr. Carter's suspicion directed or misdirected. Langston's defensiveness masked for guilt. Clara's footsteps, innocent observation or a clue. Ramsay's brandy a shield or a weakness. The wax on the sill who lit the candle." Poirot leaned back, his eyes closing for a moment, though his mind remained alert. The scream, the envelope, the wax, they were threads in a tapestry of deceit, and he would unravel them. But for now, the manor slept, its secrets locked in the hearts of its occupants. Hercule Poirot, however, did not sleep. The night was young, and the mystery was only beginning. Chapter 5. The suspect's secrets. The morning after the midnight disturbance dawned with a deceptive calm, as if Ashford Manor sought to cloak its secrets in the soft light filtering through the Cotswolds mist. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed, in a charcoal suit, his moustache waxed to perfection, descended the grand staircase with the measured tread of a man who knew the weight of the task before him. The library's false golden envelope, discovered in the small hours, had set his little grey cells ablaze, each observation a spark in the intricate machinery of his mind. The true envelope remained secure in his room's safe, but the audacity of the decoy suggested a mind both cunning and desperate mind among the guests. Now gathering in the breakfast room, the room was a study in restrained elegance, a long oak table set with bone china, silver urns steaming with coffee and tea, and a sideboard laden with kedgeree, kippers, and fresh rolls. Yet the air was heavy with unease, the clink of cutlery and the murmur of conversation unable to mask the tension that lingered like an uninvited guest. Sir Reginald sat at the head, his face drawn, his eyes darting to Poirot as if seeking salvation. Lady Beatrice, opposite, presided with a brittle grace, her smile as fragile as the porcelain cup she held. The other guests, Dr. Evelyn Carter, Victor Langston, Miss Clara Wentworth, and Colonel Hugh Ramsay ate, with varying degrees of appetite, their glances flickering like shadows in a storm. Poirot, taking his seat with a nod to his host, sipped his coffee black, unsweetened, and observed. The night's events had left their mark. Dr. Carter's spectacles seemed to magnify her wariness. Langston's usual bluster was subdued. Clara's hands trembled as she buttered her toast, and Ramsay's bloodshot eyes betrayed a restless night. Lady Beatrice's gaze lingered on her husband, a silent question in her pale blue eyes. Poirot, ever the orchestrator of order, resolved to probe the secrets each guest harbored, for the false envelope was no mere prank, it was a gauntlet thrown. At his feet, after breakfast, Poirot requested private interviews in the morning room. A smaller space overlooking the rose garden, its walls adorned with watercolors of pastoral scenes. The room's intimacy, he knew, would unsettle his subjects, revealing truths in their unguarded moments. He began with Dr. Evelyn Carter, who entered with the brisk efficiency of a woman accustomed to command. Her green suit was as severe as her expression, and she sat with her hands folded, her notebook nowhere in sight. Dr. Carter, Poirot began, his voice smooth as velvet. The events of last night suggest a person with knowledge of Sir Reginald's affairs. You are an archaeologist, we, a seeker of hidden truths. Tell me, what do you know of this document he guards so fiercely? Dr. Carter's eyes narrowed, her lips pursing. Monsieur Poirot, I unearth artifacts, not scandals. Reginald and I have collaborated on funding for my excavations. He's a patron, nothing more. But I'll admit, his obsession with that envelope is curious. I was in my room last night, reading Petrie's journals, when I heard the scream. I saw nothing, heard nothing, until we all met in the corridor. Poirot tilted his head, his eyes keen, and yet, Doctor, your rivalry with Sir Reginald is known. A dispute over a rare artifact, perhaps. One that might tempt you to pry into his secrets. Her laugh was sharp, like the crack of a whip. A Sumerian tablet, 3 years ago. He outbid me at auction, and I haven't forgotten. But I don't. Steal, Monsieur Poirot. My work is my passion, not his papers. Her alibi was firm, her manner composed, yet Poirot noted the slight clench of her jaw, sign of truth, or a well-rehearsed lie. Next came Victor Langston, his red tie a jarring note against the room's muted tones. He sprawled in the chair, his grin forced, his fingers drumming a restless tattoo. Look, Poirot, he said, preempting the question, I'm a businessman. Not a sneak thief. I was fast asleep when that scream woke me. Reginald's got his secrets, fine, but I'm here for a weekend, not a heist. Poirot's moustache twitched. Monsieur Langston, your dealings with Sir Reginald are not without complications, Nan. A financial venture, perhaps, that ties you to this document. Langston's grin faltered, a bead of sweat glistening on his brow. We've done business, sure, steel contracts, investments, but I don't know what's in that blasted envelope, and I don't care. I was in my room, and you can ask the staff. My snores probably shook the walls. His defensiveness was palpable, his eyes avoiding Poirot's, and the detective noted the faint tremor in his hands, as if they longed to betray their owner. Miss Clara Wentworth entered next, her rose-colored dress replaced by a simple grey frock, her hazel eyes wide with apprehension. She sat delicately, her hands clasped, a faint flush on her cheeks. Monsieur Poirot, she said softly, I'm no detective, but I know something's wrong here. That scream, it chilled me. I heard footsteps earlier, as I told you, but I swear I stayed in my room. Poirot leaned forward, his voice gentle, but probing. Mademoiselle, you are a writer, an observer of human nature. Your novel, it draws inspiration from this manner. Perhaps you have seen or heard something that others have missed. Clara's flush deepened, her fingers twisting together. I'm writing a story about a house like this, full of secrets. I watch people, yes, but I don't pry. Reginald's document, I don't know what it is, but I saw how he looked. At it, like it was a curse. I'm just a guest, Monsieur Poirot, nothing more. Her sincerity was compelling, yet Poirot noted the way her eyes darted to the window, as if seeking escape. Colonel Hugh Ramsay was last, his tweed suit reeking of tobacco and brandy, his mustache bristling with indignation. He stood rather than sat, his hands clasped behind his back like a soldier at parade rest. "Damned nonsense, this business," he growled. "Screams, envelopes." Reginald's lost his nerve. "I was in my room, trying to sleep off a headache, when I heard the commotion. That's all I know." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Colonel, you speak of espionage, of secrets that threaten nations. This document, could it be such a thing, to stir a man of your experience?" Ramsay's face reddened further, his voice dropping to a growl. "I've seen my share of secrets, Poirot, in India and elsewhere. But I'm retired, and I don't meddle in Reginald's affairs. If he's got enemies, that's his lookout. I'm here for the shooting, not his dramas." His bluster was convincing, but Poirot noted the slight tremble in his hands, the way his eyes avoided the detective's gaze. As Ramsay left, Poirot leaned back, his notebook open before him. He wrote, "Dr. Carter rivalry, but composed. Langston nervous, evasive. Clara sensitive, perhaps too innocent. Ramsay defensive, hiding pain. Each has a motive, each a secret. The false envelope, who placed it, and why?" The interviews had revealed much, yet the truth remained elusive. A shadow dancing just beyond his grasp. He rose, his cane tapping softly, and approached the window, where the rose garden lay in orderly splendor. Yet order, he knew, was an illusion in a house where secrets festered. The golden envelope, true or false, was the key, and Poirot would turn it, revealing the heart of the mystery. Chapter 6. The clue in the garden. The late morning sun cast dappled shadows across the gardens of Ashford Manor, where the air was fragrant with the scent of roses and freshly turned earth. Hercule Poirot, his Homburg hat tilted at a precise angle, strolled along the gravel paths, his cane tapping a measured rhythm against the stones. The formal beds, with their meticulously trimmed hedges and vibrant blooms, were a testament to order, yet Poirot's keen eyes sought the imperfections that betrayed human intervention. The false golden envelope, discovered in the library at midnight, had sharpened his senses, and he knew that the grounds, like the manor itself, held secrets waiting to be unearthed. The events of the previous night, the scream, the decoy envelope, the guests' guarded reactions, had woven a tapestry of suspicion, and Poirot's little grey cells were alight with possibilities. The true envelope remained secure in his room's safe, but the audacity of the false one suggested a mind both bold and calculating, one that moved freely within the manor's walls. The garden, with its secluded corners and hidden vistas, was the perfect stage for such a mind to leave traces, intentional or otherwise. He paused by a rosebush, its scarlet petals vivid against the green, and noticed a disturbance in the soiler scattering of petals, as if brushed aside by a careless hand. Kneeling with surprising agility for a man of his fastidious nature, Poirot examined the ground. There, half buried in the soft earth, was a torn scrap of paper, its edges ragged, its surface bearing the faint ink of a handwritten note. He extracted it with gloved fingers, holding it to the light. The words, in an elegant, looping script, read simply, "Meet me." No signature, no indication of recipient or sender, yet the paper was of fine quality, its texture akin to the stationery Poirot had seen in Clara Wentworth's notebook. His eyes narrowed, his mustache twitching faintly. Clara, the young novelist, with her dreamy eyes and trembling hands, had spoken of observing the manor's secrets, yet denied involvement in the night's events. Was this note hers, a fragment of her fiction, or something more sinister? Poirot slipped the scrap into his pocket, his mind cataloguing its implications. A meeting in the garden, perhaps clandestine, suggested motives beyond mere curiosity. He continued his walk, his gaze sweeping the path, and soon spotted another Kluwer cigarette stub, its tip stained with the faint residue of Turkish tobacco. Poirot bent to retrieve it, noting its brand, a rare blend favoured by Victor Langston, whose brash demeanour and sweaty brow had marked him as a man with secrets. The stub was fresh, its ash undisturbed by the morning dew, suggesting it had been discarded recently, perhaps in the hours before dawn. Had Langston been in the garden, meeting the author of the note? Or was this another deliberate misdirection, like the false envelope? Poirot straightened, his eyes scanning the garden's layout, a labyrinth of hedges. A stone bench tucked beneath a yew tree, a fountain that murmured softly in the distance. The manor loomed behind, its windows like watchful eyes, and he sensed he was not alone. A rustle in the shrubbery drew his attention, but when he approached, he found only a startled blackbird taking flight. Yet the feeling persisted, a prickling at the back of his neck, as if the garden itself were complicit in the mystery. Returning to the manor, Poirot sought out the housekeeper, Mrs. Ellis, a stout woman with a nonsense air, her grey hair pinned tightly beneath a cap. He found her in the servants' hall, overseeing the polishing of silver. "Madame Ellis," he said, his voice courteous but firm, "I require information. Last evening, before the disturbance, did you or your staff observe any guests in the gardens or conservatory?" Mrs. Ellis pursed her lips, her eyes assessing Poirot with a mixture of respect and wariness. "The staff are busy, Monsieur Poirot, but I can tell you that Mary, one of the maids, mentioned seeing Mr. Langston and Miss Wentworth in the conservatory after dinner. They were speaking in low voices, she said, and seemed anxious to be private. She thought nothing of it at the time. Guests often seek quiet corners." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And this Mary, she is certain it was they?" "Oh. Yes, sir," Mary sharpened. "Even if she's young. She said Mr. Langston was pacing, and Miss Wentworth looked, well, nervous, sir, like she was afraid of being overheard." "Mercy, Madame Ellis," Poirot said, his mind already turning over this new piece of the puzzle. Langston and Clara, whispering in the conservatory, a meeting that might explain. The note, the cigarette, or both. But to what purpose? A romantic liaison seemed unlikely, given Clara's reticence and Langston's bluster. A conspiracy, perhaps, or a shared fear of the document's contents. He returned to the morning room, where he had conducted his interviews, and summoned Clara Wentworth. She entered, her grey frock replaced by a pale blue dress, her hands clasped tightly before her. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "you wished to see me." Poirot gestured to a chair, his eyes gentle but piercing. "Mademoiselle Wentworth, I have found a note in the garden, in a script that resembles your own. It says, 'Meet me.' Tell me, did you write this, and if so, to whom?" Clara's face paled, her eyes widening. "A note, I write many things, Monsieur Poirot, for my novel, but I didn't leave anything in the garden. I swear it." Her hands trembled, and she clasped them tighter, as if to still their betrayal. "I was in the conservatory last night, yes, with Mr. Langston. But only briefly. He wanted to discuss a business idea, something about publishing, but I told him I wasn't interested. I went to my room after that." Poirot's gaze held hers, unyielding yet kind. And yet, Mademoiselle, a cigarette stub of the kind favoured by Monsieur Langston was found near this note. You heard footsteps, you said, before the scream. Could they have been his? Clara shook her head, her voice rising slightly. I don't know, Monsieur Poirot. I only know I didn't write any note, and I didn't see him in the garden. Please, you must believe me. Poirot inclined his head, dismissing her with a gentle smile. Merci, mademoiselle. I believe what the facts reveal, and they shall speak in time. Next, he summoned Langston, who entered with a forced grin, his tie askew, his hands shoved into his pockets. Poirot, what's this about? More questions. I told you, I was sleeping when that scream woke the house. Poirot held up the cigarette stub, his eyes never leaving Langston's face. This, Monsieur Langston, was found in the garden, near a note that suggests a clandestine meeting. You were seen with Mademoiselle Wentworth in the conservatory last evening. What did you discuss, and why were you in the garden? Langston's grin vanished, his face reddening. A cigarette. Half the men in England smoke those, Poirot. As for Clara Miss Wentworth, she's a writer, and I thought she might know. Some publishers, we talked, that's all. I didn't go near the garden, and I didn't write any blasted note. His voice rose, but his eyes flickered with something akin to fear. Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. Very well, monsieur. Langston, but the facts, they do not lie, and they will lead me to the truth. As Langston left, Poirot opened his notebook, adding, the note Clara's hand, or a forgery. The cigarette Langston's, or planted. The conservatory meeting, a business talk, or a cover. The garden watches, but does not speak. The clues were mounting, each a thread in the intricate web of deception. Poirot rose, his cane tapping softly, and gazed out at the garden. The rosebush, the note, the cigarette, they were signposts to a truth hidden in plain sight, and Hercule Poirot would follow them, step by meticulous step. Chapter 7. A second disappearance. The sky above Ashford Manor had turned leaden by Saturday evening, the air heavy with the promise of a storm. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a low growl that seemed to echo the mounting tension within the manor's walls. Hercule Poirot stood at the window of the morning room, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes tracing the dark clouds that rolled across the Cotswolds. The events of the previous night, the scream, the false golden envelope in the library, the clues in the garden had sharpened his senses, and his little grey cells were alight with the intricate dance of suspicion and deduction. The true envelope remained secure in his room's safe, but the decoy, the note, and the cigarette stub suggested a plot far more complex than a simple theft. Now, as the manor prepared for dinner, Poirot sensed the mystery deepening, like a shadow lengthening before dusk. The guests had gathered in the drawing room, their voices a strained hum over the clink of sherry glasses. Sir Reginald, his face etched with worry, stood by the fireplace, his fingers gripping the mantel as if to anchor himself. Lady Beatrice, in a gown of deep emerald, moved among the guests with a hostess's grace, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Victor Langston, his usual bravado subdued, nursed a drink, his gaze darting to the door. Miss Clara Wentworth, her hands clasped tightly, sat near a lamp, her face pale as she pretended to read. Colonel Hugh Ramsay, his tweed suit rumpled, muttered about the weather, his brandy glass never far from his lips. Only Dr. Evelyn Carter was absent, her chair empty, her absence a silent question mark. Poirot, impeccably dressed in a black dinner jacket, entered the room, his presence commanding despite his diminutive stature. "Bonsoir, mes amis," he said, his voice smooth but edged with purpose. "I note that Dr. Carter is not among us. Has she been detained?" Lady Beatrice's smile faltered, her hand pausing mid-gesture. "Evelyn said she was feeling unwell after luncheon," she replied, her voice tight. "She went to her room to rest. I assumed she'd join us for dinner." Sir Reginald frowned, his eyes narrowing. "Unwell? She seemed fine this morning. Has anyone checked on her?" "I knocked on her door an hour ago," Clara offered, her voice soft but clear. "There was no answer, but I thought she might be sleeping. I didn't want to disturb her." Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes gleaming with sudden alertness. "No answer, mademoiselle. That is most curious. Let us ascertain her well-being at once." He gestured to the group, his tone brooking no argument. "Sir Reginald, Lady Beatrice, if you will accompany me. The rest remain here." The trio ascended the staircase, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. The storm's first raindrops pattering against the windows. Dr. Carter's room, on the second floor, was at the end of a long corridor, its oak door closed. Poirot knocked, his knuckles rapping sharply, but only silence answered. He tried the handle locked. Sir Reginald's face paled, and Lady Beatrice clutched her husband's arm, her breath catching. "Monsieur Poirot," Sir Reginald said, his voice low, "this is alarming. Evelyn is not one to miss dinner without cause." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind racing. "We must enter, Sir Reginald. Do you have a key?" Lady Beatrice nodded, producing a master key from a chain at her waist. "The housekeeper keeps spares," she murmured, her hands trembling as she unlocked the door. It swung open, revealing a room in disarray, stark contrast to the manor's usual order. The bed was unmade, its covers tossed aside. A chair lay overturned, its cushion askew. A window, overlooking the garden, stood open, its frame splintered, the curtain fluttering in the wind. Rain had begun to seep onto the sill, pooling in small, glistening beads. Poirot stepped inside, his cane tapping softly as he surveyed the scene. "Dr. Carter is not here," he said, his voice calm but weighted with significance. "This disorder, it suggests a struggle, or perhaps a hasty departure." He approached the window, his eyes scanning the frame. A single muddy footprint, large and distinct, marred the polished floraman's shoe, size 10, its tread worn at the heel. Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers tracing the outline, noting the soil's texture, still damp from the garden below. Lady Beatrice gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "A footprint. Does it mean foul play?" Poirot rose, his expression unreadable. "It means, madame, that we must consider all possibilities. A struggle, a flight, or a stage in each, is a thread in the tapestry of this mystery." He turned to Sir Reginald, whose face was ashen. "Tell me, Sir Reginald, did Dr. Carter have enemies among your guests, or perhaps a reason to flee?" Sir Reginald shook his head, his voice hoarse. "Enemies? No, not that I know. Evelyn and I have had disagreements, professional ones, over her excavations, but nothing to warrant this. She's a scholar, not a fugitive." Poirot's gaze shifted to the desk, where a single sheet of paper lay, its edges curling in the damp air. It was blank, save for a faint smudge of ink, as if a pen had been pressed too hard and abandoned. He pocketed it, his mind noting its potential significance. "We must search the grounds," he said, his tone decisive. "But first I shall speak with the others." This footprint, it is a clue, but not yet a truth. They returned to the drawing room, where the remaining guests waited, their faces a mixture of curiosity and dread. Poirot recounted the discovery, omitting the footprint, for now, and watched their reactions. Langston's eyes widened, his hand tightening on his glass. Gone? What do you mean, gone? She was here this morning, sharp as ever. Clara's voice trembled. I saw her at luncheon, Monsieur Poirot. She seemed distracted, but not unwell. Could she have left of her own accord? Ramsay snorted, his brandy glass empty. Nonsense. Carter's not the type to bolt. If she's gone, someone's behind it. Mark my words, Poirot, there's a snake in this house. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his voice soft but commanding. Mies Amos, I require your alibis for the hours since luncheon. Monsieur Langston, you first. Langston bristled, his face reddening. Me, I was in the billiard room, playing a solitary game. Ask the footman, he brought me a drink around 4. I didn't see Carter, and I didn't go near her room. His voice was loud, but Poirot noted the sweat on his brow. The way his eyes avoided the group, Clara spoke next, her hands twisting together. I was in the library, writing. I didn't hear anything unusual, but I was lost in my work. I swear, I didn't see Dr. Carter after luncheon. Ramsay, swaying slightly, shrugged. I was in my room, napping. This blasted weather gives me headaches. Woke up when Beatrice called us for drinks. That's all I know. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing their words, their gestures. Langston's polished boots, he recalled, were size 10, but pristine when inspected that morning. Could he have changed them? Clara's distraction seemed genuine, but her writing might conceal more than fiction. Ramsay's nap was convenient, his brandy a shield. The footprint, the open window, the ink smudge, they were pieces of a puzzle, and Poirot would fit them together. As the storm broke, rain lashing the windows, Poirot organized a search of the grounds, though he doubted Dr. Carter would be found easily. The staff, led by Mrs. Ellis, scoured the gardens, their lanterns flickering. In the downpour, Poirot remained in the manor, his cane tapping as he paced the corridor outside Dr. Carter's room. The footprint troubled him. It was too obvious, too deliberate, like the false envelope. Was it a clue or a trap? He opened his notebook, writing, Dr. Carter missing, staged or genuine. The footprint Langston's, size, but too convenient. The ink smudge a message abandoned. Clara's distraction, Ramsay's nap, Langston's alibi all suspect. The storm hides tracks, but not truths. The manor's secrets were multiplying, but Hercule Poirot, with his unerring logic, would unravel them, one meticulous step at a time. Chapter 8. The hidden passage. The storm had spent its fury by mid-morning, leaving Ashford Manor shrouded in a damp, grey mist that clung to the stone walls like a veil of secrets. Hercule Poirot, his black suit immaculate despite the restless night, stood in the library, his eyes tracing the oak-panelled walls with the precision of a cartographer charting uncharted lands. The false golden envelope, the scream, the muddy footprint in Dr. Evelyn Carter's room, and her mysterious disappearance had woven a web of intrigue that vibrated with hidden motives. The true envelope remained secure in his room's safe. But the events of the past 24 hours suggested a plot far more intricate than a mere theft, a plot that required his little grey cells to work at their fullest capacity. The library, with its towering shelves and heavy silence, seemed to pulse with the memory of the previous night's discovery. Poirot's morning had been spent re-examining the scene. his gloved fingers probing the mahogany table where the false envelope had lain, his eyes noting the faint scratches on its surface, as if it had been moved hastily. The smudge of crimson, wax on the windowsill, the torn note in the garden. The cigarette stubble were clues, but they lacked context, like fragments of a mosaic scattered across a floor. Poirot knew that the manor itself, with its centuries-old secrets, might hold the key to binding them together. He paced the room, his cane tapping a soft rhythm, his mind replaying the guests' alibis, their guarded glances, their half-truths. Sir Reginald's panic, Lady Beatrice's trembling hands, Victor Langston's defensive bluster, Clara Wentworth's nervous sincerity, Colonel Hugh Ramsay's brandy-soaked evasions, each was a piece of the puzzle, yet none fit perfectly. Dr. Carter's empty room, with its overturned chair and muddy footprint, suggested a staged disappearance, but to what end? Poirot's instincts told him the answer lay not in the open spaces of the manor, but in its hidden corners, the places where shadows lingered. His attention was drawn to a section of the panelling near the fireplace, where a faint seam, almost imperceptibly, caught the light at an odd angle. He approached, his fingers tracing the wood, feeling for irregularities. A slight pressure on a carved rosette produced a soft click, and a panel swung inward, revealing a narrow passage, its air cool and musty, redolent of dust and time. Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of discovery. A hidden passage, such a feature was not uncommon in houses of this age, built to conceal priests or smugglers, but its presence in Ashford Manor suggested a purpose more immediate. He stepped inside, his cane probing the stone floor, his handkerchief held to his nose against the damp odor. The passage was narrow, its walls rough-hewn, its ceiling low enough to force Poirot to stoop slightly. A faint light filtered from ahead, suggesting an exit elsewhere in the manor. As he moved forward, his foot brushed against something softer. Glove, black leather, monogrammed with a single R in gold thread. He lifted it with his cane, examining it closely. It was a man's glove, well worn but of fine quality, its mate missing. Poirot pocketed it, his mind racing. The R could belong to Colonel Ramsay, or perhaps Sir Reginald himself, but its presence here, in a passage unknown to most, was a clue of undeniable significance. The passage wound through the manor's walls, its path twisting until it emerged behind a tapestry in a corridor near Dr. Carter's room. Poirot paused, his eyes narrowing as he noted the proximity. The muddy footprint in her room, the open window, the overturned chair-hood, the passage explained them. Had someone used this secret route to enter her room, stage her disappearance, and leave the footprint as a deliberate misdirection? The glove suggested a connection to Ramsay, but its age and where hinted it might have been lost long before this weekend's events. Poirot returned to the library, his mind a whirl of possibilities, and summoned Colonel Ramsay for questioning. The colonel entered, his face flushed from more than the morning's chill, his tweed suit carrying the faint scent of tobacco. "What's this about, Poirot?" he growled, his moustache bristling. "I've told you all I know." Poirot held up the glove, his gaze unyielding. "This, Colonel, was found in a hidden passage connecting the library to the corridor near Dr. Carter's room. It bears your initial none. Explain its presence." Ramsay's eyes widened, then narrowed, his voice gruff. "That's mine, yes, but I lost it weeks ago, during a shooting party here. Haven't seen it since. You're not pinning this on me." "Poirot, I was in my room when Carter vanished, and I have no reason to skulk in passages." Poirot's expression remained serene, though his mind noted the colonel's defensiveness, the slight slur in his speech. "Weeks ago, you say, yet it is here, in a place few know. Tell me, Colonel, have you explored this passage before?" Ramsay snorted, his hands clenching. "Explored? I'm no schoolboy playing hide-and-seek. This house is old passages like that are common. I might have wandered in there once, drunk, lost my glove. But I'm no thief, and I didn't touch Carter." Poirot dismissed him with a nod, his thoughts turning to the passage's implications. It offered a means to move unseen, to place the false envelope, to stage Dr. Carter's disappearance. But who knew of it? Sir Reginald, as master of the house, surely did. Lady Beatrice, with her master key, might have access. The staff, like Mrs. Ellis, could know of such secrets, and the guests had once stumbled upon it or been told. Poirot recalled Clara's note, Langston's cigarette, and Ramsay's glove, each a thread in a tapestry of deception. He sought out Mrs. Ellis, finding her in the pantry, her hands busy with inventory. "Madame Ellis," he said, his voice courteous but firm, "this manor, it has secrets. A passage, hidden in the library, who knows of it?" The housekeeper's eyes flickered with surprise, then steadied. "The passage, sir, it's an old priest-hole from the Reformation days. Sir Reginald knows, of course, and Lady Beatrice. The staff are told to avoid it too dangerous with loose stones. I can't say if the guests know, but it's not spoken of openly." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing her words. The passage was a secret, but not impenetrable. Someone had used it, perhaps to move the false envelope, to enter Dr. Carter's room, to leave the footprint. He returned to his room, checking the safe once more. The true envelope was untouched, its seal intact. Sitting at his desk, he opened his notebook, writing, "The passenger, path to deceit. Ramsay's glove, lost or placed. The footprint deliberate, to mislead. Mrs. Ellis truthful or guarded. The manor hides its own secrets, but Hercule Poirot will uncover them." The mist outside thickened, but Poirot's resolve was clear. The hidden passage was a key, unlocking not just rooms, but motives. The mystery of the golden envelope and Dr. Carter's fate drew closer to its truth. Chapter 9. The revelation. The mist that had cloaked Ashford Manor since dawn began to lift by Sunday morning, revealing a sky of pale blue streaked with wisps of cloud. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of wet grass and fading roses, but within the manor's walls, the atmosphere remained heavy with suspicion. Hercule Poirot, his black suit as pristine as ever, stood in the morning room, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes reflecting the calm resolve of a man on the verge of unraveling a tangled skein. The false golden envelope, the scream, the muddy footprint, Dr. Evelyn Carter's disappearance, and the hidden passage had all pointed to a conspiracy woven with deliberate care. The true envelope, still secure in Poirot's safe, was the fulcrum of the mystery. But the events of the past 2 days suggested a motive deeper than mere theft. A motive rooted in the human heart. The search for Dr. Carter had continued through the night, with the staff combing the grounds under Mrs. Ellis's direction, their lanterns casting eerie glows in the rain-soaked darkness. Poirot, however, had remained within the manor, his mind sifting through the clues, the torn note in the garden, the cigarette stub, the monogrammed glove, the hidden passage, and the ink smudge in Carter's room. Each was a piece of a puzzle, and the little grey cells were now aligning them with precision. The guests, restless and wary, had gathered for breakfast, their faces etched with fatigue and unspoken questions. Sir Reginald's jaw was set, his eyes darting to Poirot as if seeking reassurance. Lady Beatrice, her emerald gown replaced by a sombre grey, poured tea with a hand that trembled only slightly. Victor Langston's bravado was a shadow of itself, his tie askew, his laughter hollow. Clara Wentworth, clutching her notebook, avoided eye contact, while Colonel Hugh Ramsay, nursing a coffee instead of brandy, muttered about the futility of the search as Poirot sipped his café noir. A commotion at the manor's entrance broke the tense silence. Mrs. Ellis appeared, her face flushed with urgency. "Monsieur Poirot, Sir Reginald," she said, her voice steady but strained. "Dr. Carter has been found. She's in the village, at the inn. A stable boy saw her there this morning, unharmed but shaken. She's on her way back now." A collective exhale filled the room, though suspicion lingered in the guests' glances. Sir Reginald's shoulders sagged with relief, but his eyes remained troubled. "Thank God," he murmured. "But why the devil did she go to the village? And that room her disappearance it makes no sense." Poirot's moustache twitched, his eyes gleaming with purpose. "All will be explained, Sir Reginald. I request that we await Dr. Carter's return in the drawing-room. There we shall uncover the truth of this affair." An hour later, Dr. Carter entered, her green suit rumpled, her spectacles slightly askew, but her posture defiant. Her dark hair was loose, and her eyes, though weary, held a spark of resolve. The guests, assembled in the drawing-room, turned. To her, their expressions a mix of relief and suspicion. Poirot stood by the fireplace, his cane resting lightly against his side, his presence commanding the room's attention. "Dr. Carter," he began, his voice smooth but incisive, "you have caused much alarm. Pray, explain your absence and the state of your room." Dr. Carter adjusted her spectacles, her voice crisp despite her fatigue. "Monsieur Poirot, I owe you all an apology. Last evening, after luncheon, I received a note slipped under my door. It warned me to leave the manor at once, or face dire consequences. It was unsigned, but the handwriting was familiar, though I couldn't place it. I panicked, I admit. I packed a small bag, broke the window to make it seem I'd been taken, and fled through the garden to the village. I spent the night at the inn, too frightened to return until this morning." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind seizing on the note. "This note, Doctor, do you have it?" She produced a crumpled sheet from her pocket, its ink smudged but legible. Poirot examined it, noting the bold, flowing script similar to the "Meet Me" note from the garden, yet distinct in its urgency. The paper matched the stationery in Sir Reginald's study, a detail that sent his thoughts racing. "Mercy," he said, pocketing the note. "Your room, the overturned chair, the footprint was this, all staged by you." Dr. Carter nodded, her face flushing. "Yes, to make it convincing. The footprint was an accident. I stepped in mud while climbing out. I'm no actress, Monsieur Poirot, but I feared for my safety." Poirot turned to the group, his gaze sweeping over their faces. "Mies Amos, this note, like the false envelope, is a piece of the puzzle. But it raises a question. Who sought to frighten Dr. Carter, and why?" He paused, letting the silence weigh on them, then addressed Sir Reginald. "Sir Reginald, you spoke of a document that could ruin reputations. I believe it is time you reveal its nature, for it is the heart of this affair." Sir Reginald's face paled, his hands clenching the arms of his chair. "Poirot, very well. The document in the golden envelope is a forged will, naming me sole heir to the estate of Lord Haverford, a rival in business. It was drawn up by an associate to secure my position in a deal that would have collapsed otherwise. I never intended to use it, but its existence is dangerous. I staged the envelope's delivery to you, Monsieur Poirot, to flush out a traitor among my guests, someone I suspected of planning to steal it. A gasp rippled through the room. Lady Beatrice's cup clattered in its saucer, her eyes wide. With shock, Langston swore under his breath, his face reddening. Clara's hands tightened on her notebook. While Ramsay's scowl deepened, Dr. Carter's lips parted. But she said nothing, her eyes fixed on Sir Reginald. Poirot's voice cut through the tension, calm but relentless. A bold plan, Sir Reginald, but flawed. The false envelope, the scream, Dr. Carter's flight. They suggest not a traitor, but a deeper motive. The note to Dr. Carter, written on your stationery, points to someone with access to your study. The passage, known to you and Lady Beatrice, offers a means to move unseen. The glove, monogrammed with an R, implicates the Colonel, yet he claims it was lost. The cigarette stub, the torn note in the garden, they all converge on a truth I now see clearly. He turned to Dr. Carter. Your flight, Doctor, was not merely fear. You suspected Sir Reginald's plan, your rivalry over the Cimmerian. Tablety outbid you, but you knew of his dealings, perhaps even the forged will. Did you hope to expose him by staging your disappearance? Dr. Carter shook her head, her voice firm. No, Monsieur Poirot. I knew nothing of the will until now. I fled because I thought the note came from someone who knew my own secret, a professional indiscretion, a misattributed artifact. I feared exposure. Poirot nodded, his eyes shifting to Sir Reginald. Then the true orchestrator lies elsewhere. The note's script, the passage, the stationery, they point to one who moves with subtlety, who seeks to protect, not destroy. He paused, his gaze settling on Lady Beatrice, whose face had turned ashen. Madame, you have been silent, yet your hands betray you. The note to Dr. Carter, the false envelope, were they your doing, to shield your husband from his own folly? Lady Beatrice's eyes filled with tears, her voice barely a whisper. I couldn't let him ruin us, Monsieur Poirot. The willet was madness. I placed the false envelope to distract from the real one, hoping to scare off any who sought it. The note to Evelyn I wrote it. Yes, to protect her from Reginald's scheme. I used the passage, the stationery. I meant no harm. The room fell silent, the weight of her confession settling like dust. Poirot's eyes softened, though his voice remained firm. Madame, your heart sought to protect, but your methods have endangered. The truth, it is now revealed. He turned to the group, his cane tapping once. The affair of the golden envelope is not yet closed, but its heart is laid bare. Sir Reginald, destroy the forged will. Dr. Carter, your secret is safe. Mies, Amos, let us end this charade. In his notebook, Poirot wrote, Lady Beatrice the architect of deception, driven by love. The passage her path, not Ramsay's. The will poison now neutralized. The truth emerges, but the shadows remain. The storm had passed, but Poirot knew the manor's secrets were not yet fully spent. Chapter 10. The Confrontation. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the drawing room of Ashford Manor, its golden rays filtering through the tall windows, gilding the velvet drapes and the polished surfaces of the Chippendale furniture. The air, however, was thick with tension, as if the very walls held their breath, awaiting the unraveling of the secrets that had festered within them. Hercule Poirot stood by the fireplace, his diminutive figure commanding the room with an authority born of intellect and precision. His black suit was immaculate, his moustache perfectly waxed, and his green eyes gleamed with the quiet intensity of a man who had pieced together the final fragments of a complex puzzle. The true golden envelope remained secure in his rooms. Safe, but the false one, the scream, the hidden passage. Dr. Evelyn Carter's staged disappearance and Lady Beatrice's tearful confession had brought the mystery to a crescendo. Now it was time for the denouement. The guests were assembled, their faces a gallery of apprehension and curiosity. Sir Reginald Ashford sat at the head of the room, his broad shoulders slumped, his silver hair dishevelled, his eyes fixed on Poirot with a mixture of dread and hope. Lady Beatrice, beside him, clutched a handkerchief, her grey gown a sombre contrast to her pale, strained features. Dr. Carter, returned from the village, sat erect, her spectacles glinting, her composure restored but her eyes wary. Victor Langston, his red tie loosened, leaned forward, his hands fidgeting as if itching to escape. Miss Clara Wentworth, her notebook abandoned, sat with her hands clasped, her hazel eyes wide with anticipation. Colonel Hugh Ramsay, his ruddy face set in a scowl, gripped a glass of water, his usual brandy forsaken in the gravity of the moment. Poirot cleared his throat, his voice calm but resonant, cutting through the silence like a blade. Mes amis, he began, his cane resting lightly against his side. We have reached the moment of truth in the affair of the golden envelope. The events of this weekend, the scream in the night, the false envelope, the disappearance of Dr. Carter, the hidden passage have woven a tapestry of deception, but Hercule Poirot has unravelled its threads. The truth, it is now clear, lies not in theft or betrayal, but in the passions of the human heart. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room, noting each guest's reaction. Sir Reginald's tightening jaw, Lady Beatrice's trembling hands, Dr. Carter's narrowed eyes, Langston's nervous swallow, Clara's flushed cheeks, Ramsay's furrowed brow. Let us begin with the document, Poirot continued, entrusted to me by Sir Reginald. A forged will, naming him heir to Lord Haverford's estate, a secret that could ruin reputations and fortunes. Sir Reginald, in his zeal to protect it, devised a plan to flush out a traitor, placing the true envelope in my care, while allowing rumours of its existence to stir suspicion. Sir Reginald nodded, his voice low. I thought it would expose whoever sought to betray me, Poirot. I never meant for it to go this far. Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. But your plan, it was a spark in a powder keg. The false envelope, found in the library, was no accident. It was placed there to sow chaos, to distract from the true document. And Dr. Carter's disappearance staged, she claims, after receiving a threatening note, was another thread in this web. But who spun it, and why? He turned to Lady Beatrice, whose handkerchief was now a twisted knot in her hands. Madame, you confessed to writing the note to Dr. Carter, to placing the false envelope, all to protect your husband from his own folly. You used the hidden passage, known to you as mistress of this house, to move unseen. You admitted this, driven by love and fear. But, Madame, I submit that your confession, it is not the whole truth. Lady Beatrice gasped, her eyes filling with tears. Monsieur Poirot, I've told you everything. I only wanted to stop Reginald's madness, to keep him from ruin. Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. "Non, madame, your actions were not merely protective. They were calculated, driven by a deeper motivation. You feared not only the ruin of your husband's reputation, but the loss of his affection. The forged will, it was a symbol of his obsession, a rival for your place in his heart. You orchestrated the scream, the false envelope, the note to Dr. Carter, to disrupt his plan, to force him to abandon the will. But there is more." He turned to Clara Wentworth, whose face paled, her hands trembling. "Mademoiselle Wentworth, your note in the garden, meet me, was not, as you claimed, a fiction for your novel. It was written to Colonel Ramsay, was it not? You, with your observant eyes, saw more than you admitted. You knew of the passage, perhaps from an old story of the manor, and you sought to warn the colonel, to enlist his aid in uncovering Sir Reginald's secret." Clara's voice was barely a whisper. I didn't mean harm, Monsieur Poirot. I heard whispers, saw Reginald's fear. I wrote the note to ask the colonel's advice, but he never came. I dropped it in the garden by mistake." Ramsay snorted, his scowl deepening. "Nonsense, girl. I never got any note. I told you, Poirot, my glove was lost weeks ago. I'm no part of this." Poirot's mustache twitched, his gaze shifting to Langston. "And you, Monsieur Langston, your cigarette stub in the garden. Your presence in the conservatory with Mademoiselle Wentworth, you were not discussing publishing, as you claimed. You suspected the will's existence. Your business dealings with Sir Reginald teetered on the edge of ruin, and you hoped to use the document to secure your position, perhaps by blackmail." Langston's face reddened, his hands balling into fists. "That's preposterous, Poirot. I'm a businessman, not a blackmailer. I was in the billiard room when Carter vanished, and I never went near that passage." Poirot raised a hand, his voice cutting through the protest. "Enough, monsieur. The truth, it is clear. Lady Beatrice, you are the architect of this affair. You placed the false envelope. You wrote the note to Dr. Carter. You used the passage to stage the chaos. But the scream, it was not yours alone. You enlisted a maid, perhaps Mary, to cry out, to draw attention to the library. The footprint in Dr. Carter's room, it was not hers, but yours, madame, wearing your husband's boots to mislead. You sought to protect, yes, but also to control, to reclaim your husband from his dangerous obsession." Lady Beatrice crumpled, her sobs breaking the silence. "It's true," she whispered, her voice raw. "I couldn't bear Reginald's fixation on that will, his secrets, his distance. I thought if I could scare everyone, make them think. The document was stolen, he'd let it go. I used the passage, the boots, the stationery. I only wanted him back." Sir Reginald reached for her hand, his face etched with guilt. "Beatrice, my dear, I never meant to hurt you. The will was a mistake, a desperate act. I should have told you." Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone remained resolute. "Madame, your love drove you to deception, but it endangered all. The truth, it is now laid bare. The affair of the golden envelope, it is a tale of passion, not greed." He turned to the group, his cane tapping once. "Mies, Amos, let this be a lesson. Secrets, they breed chaos. Sir Reginald, destroy the will. Lady Beatrice, seek forgiveness in truth. The rest, return to your lives, but remember Hercule Poirot sees all." In his notebook, he wrote, "Lady Beatrice jealousy, not love, her true motive. The passage, the scream, the footprint her tools. Clara's note, Langston's ambition mere threads in her web. The truth triumphs, but the heart, remains fragile. The confrontation was over, but Poirot knew the manor's shadows would linger. Chapter 11. The resolution. The sun dipped low over Ashford Manor, painting the Cotswolds in hues of amber and rose, as if to soften the raw edges of the weekend's turmoil. The drawing room, where Hercule Poirot had just unveiled the truth behind the affair of the golden envelope, was steeped in a heavy silence, broken only by the soft ticking of a mantel clock and the occasional crackle of the fire. The guests, their faces etched with a mixture of relief, shame, and lingering unease, sat in a semicircle, their eyes fixed on Poirot, whose diminutive figure seemed to fill the room with an authority born of unerring logic. The true golden envelope, still secure in his room's safe, had been the catalyst for a drama of jealousy and deception, now laid bare by Poirot's relentless pursuit of truth. Lady Beatrice's confession, her orchestration of the false envelope, the scream, the staged disappearance of Dr. Evelyn Carter had exposed the heart of the mystery, but the resolution required more than revelation. It demanded restoration of order. Poirot stood by the fireplace, his black suit a stark contrast to the warm glow of the flames, his mustache perfectly symmetrical, his green eyes calm but piercing. "Mies Amos," he began, his voice a measured cadence, "the affair of the golden envelope is concluded, but its lessons remain. The human heart, it is a labyrinth of passion and fear, and this weekend we have navigated its darkest corners. The truth, it is not merely a solution, but a mirror, reflecting our weaknesses and our hopes." He turned to Sir Reginald Ashford, whose broad shoulders were slumped, his silver hair catching the firelight as he gazed at his wife with a mixture of guilt and tenderness. "Sir Reginald," Poirot said, his tone firm but not unkind, "the forged will. It was a poison in your house, a temptation that drove your wife to desperation. I urge you to destroy it this very day, and let its shadow no longer darken your path." Sir Reginald nodded, his voice hoarse with emotion. "You're right, Poirot. It was a folly, a desperate grasp at power I didn't need. I'll burn it myself before we leave this room." He rose, his movements slow but resolute, and crossed to a writing desk, retrieving a key from his pocket. "The safe in my there, not with you, Poirot. I kept a copy out of fear, but no more." Lady Beatrice, her grey gown crumpled, her face streaked with tears, reached for his hand. "Reginald, I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I only wanted to protect us, to keep you from ruin. I was wrong, terribly wrong." Poirot's eyes softened, though his posture remained erect. "Madame, your love was your motive, but love, it must be tempered with trust. You have confessed, and in that confession there is redemption. Rebuild with your husband, and let honesty be your foundation." Dr. Evelyn Carter, her spectacles glinting, spoke next, her voice steady despite the ordeal of her flight to the village. "Monsieur Poirot, I was a fool to run, to stage that scene in my room. I thought the note meant someone knew my secret, a misattributed artifact, a professional shame. But it was Lady Beatrice, trying to protect me. I owe her my gratitude, and you my respect." Poirot inclined his head. "Doctor, your fear was human, but your return, it is courageous. Let this be a lesson. Secrets, they bind us only until we set them free." Victor Langston, his red tie now discarded, his face flushed with chagrin, cleared his throat. "Poirot, I swear I had no part in this mess. I thought the will might save my business, yes, but I didn't touch that envelope, real or fake." I'm no saint, but I'm no thief either. Poirot's moustache twitched, his gaze piercing. Monsieur Langston, your ambition is a fire that burns brightly, but it must be controlled. You did not act, but your thoughts, they wandered too dark places. Return to your dealings with integrity, or they will consume you. Miss Clara Wentworth, her hazel eyes bright with unshed tears, clutched her hands together. Monsieur Poirot, I only wrote that note to Colonel Ramsay to ask for help, to understand what was happening. I never meant to cause trouble. All I have, and I let my imagination run too far. Poirot's smile was gentle, almost paternal. Mademoiselle, your eyes, they see much, and your pen, it captures truth. Use it wisely, and let this weekend be a story that teaches, not torments. Colonel Hugh Ramsay, his ruddy face less florid than usual, set down his glass with a clunk. Damned if I know why I got dragged into this, Poirot. My glove, my name nothing. But coincidence, I'm here for the shooting, not conspiracies. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Colonel, your glove, it was a red herring, but your presence, it is a reminder retirement does not absolve us of vigilance. Guard your actions as you once guarded your men. Sir Reginald returned, holding a single sheet of paper. Forged will, its parchment crisp, despite its malevolent purpose. He approached the fireplace, his hand trembling as he cast it into the flames. The paper curled, blackened, and vanished, its ashes mingling with the embers. The room seemed to exhale, the weight of the secret lifting. Though the scars of the weekend remained, Poirot addressed the group once more, his cane tapping softly against the floor. Mise Amos, order is restored, but the heart, it heals more. Slowly, leave Ashford Manor with lessons learned. Truth is a light that banishes shadows, but only if we dare to look upon it. Hercule Poirot bids you farewell, but he will not forget. As the guests dispersed, their footsteps echoing in the grand hall, Poirot remained by the fireplace, watching the last embers of the will fade. Sir Reginald and Lady Beatrice lingered, their hands clasped, their faces a mixture of resolve and fragility. Monsieur Poirot, Sir Reginald said, his voice steady at last, we owe you everything. How can we repay you? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Live honestly, Sir Reginald, and love wisely. That is payment enough for Hercule Poirot. In his notebook, he wrote, the will destroyed, its poison gone. Lady Beatrice, redeemed by truth. The guests, chastened but wiser. The manor's secrets slayed bare, but its heart still beats. Order triumphs, as it must. The resolution was complete, but Poirot knew that the echoes of this affair would linger, a reminder of the delicate balance between love and deception. Chapter 12. Poirot's reflection. The London morning was crisp, the air carrying a faint temps of coal smoke and autumn leaves as Hercule Poirot sat in his impeccably ordered flat at Whitehaven Mansions. The golden envelope, once the heart of the mystery at Ashford Manor, was now a fading memory, its secrets burned to ash in the manor's fireplace. Yet the affair lingered in Poirot's mind, a tapestry of human passions and deceptions that his little grey cells had unravelled with their usual precision. He sipped his tisane, the delicate aroma of chamomile and mint a soothing counterpoint to the whirl of his thoughts, and gazed out the window at the bustling street below, where life moved in its chaotic rhythm. The drawing-room was a sanctuary of symmetry, the books on the mahogany shelves aligned with mathematical exactness, the silver coffee service gleaming on its tray, the porcelain figurines on the mantel arranged in perfect balance. George, His valet moved with quiet efficiency, clearing the breakfast tray, his presence as unobtrusive as ever. "Will you be needing anything else, sir?" George asked, his tone deferential. "None, George," Poirot replied, his voice soft but resonant, "only the tranquility to reflect. The affair at Ashford Manor, it has left its mark, and Hercule Poirot must consider its lessons." George nodded, retreating silently, and Poirot opened his leather notebook, its pages filled with the meticulous notes of the weekend's events. The false envelope, the scream, the hidden passage, Dr. Evelyn Carter's stage disappearance, the muddy footprint, the torn note, the cigarette stub, and Lady Beatrice's confession. They were all threads in a web of jealousy and fear, woven by human hands and unraveled by his intellect. He turned to a fresh page, his fountain pen poised, and began to write, his thoughts as ordered as the room around him. "The affair of the golden envelope," he wrote, "is a study in the human heart. Sir Reginald Ashford, driven by ambition, crafted a forged will, a secret that poisoned his house. Lady Beatrice, consumed by jealousy, sought to protect her husband by sowing chaos. A false envelope, a staged scream, a note to drive Dr. Carter away. The guests: Dr. Carter, with her hidden shame; Victor Langston, with his grasping ambition; Clara Wentworth, with her observant eyes; Colonel Ramsay, with his bluster itch, played their part, unwitting or otherwise. The manor, with its hidden passage, was a stage for their passions. But it was Hercule Poirot who brought order to the drama. He paused, his pen hovering, his mind revisiting the confrontation in the drawing room. Lady Beatrice's tearful admission, her use of the passage and her husband's boots to mislead, had been the key to unlocking the mystery. Her love, twisted by fear of losing Sir Reginald to his schemes, had driven her to deception, but her confession had opened the path to redemption. Sir Reginald's destruction of the will, the guests' chastened departures, the manor's return to quiet, these were the fruits of Poirot's method, his relentless pursuit of truth through the smallest details. Yet Poirot's reflection was not merely on the facts. The affair had revealed the fragility of trust, the ease with which love could turn to obsession, ambition to greed, observation to intrusion. Dr. Carter's flight to the village, spurred by a note she feared exposed her professional misstep, showed how guilt could cloud judgment. Langston's nervous denials, his cigarette stub, a silent accusation, betrayed a man teetering on the edge of ruin. Clara's note to Ramsay, dropped in the garden, was the act of a writer too, caught in her own story. And Ramsay, his glove, relic of carelessness, hid his pain behind brandy and bluster. Each had been touched by the golden envelope, not for its contents, but for what it represented: a power to destroy or redeem. Poirot leaned back, his eyes half closed, his mind turning to the manor itself. Ashford Manor, with its Georgian symmetry and hidden passages, was a microcosm of the human condition, beautiful in its order, yet riddled with secrets. The passage, known to Lady Beatrice and Sir Reginald, had been the tool of her deception. Its musty confines, a metaphor for the shadows in her heart. The rose garden, with its scattered petals and buried note, had whispered of clandestine meetings. The library, with its false envelope and wax smudge, had been the stage for a charade. Yet order had prevailed, as it always must for Hercule Poirot. He wrote again, "The lesson of Ashford Manor is this: the truth. It is a light that burns away deception, but it requires courage to face." Lady Beatrice found that courage in confession. Sir Reginald found it in destruction. The guests found it in their humbled departures, and I, Hercule Poirot, find it in the exercise of the little grey cells, which see what others overlooked, the tremor of a hand, the flicker of an eye, the silence that speaks louder than words. He closed the notebook, his fingers brushing its leather cover, and rose to approach the window. The London street below was alive with movement, cabs rattling, pedestrians hurrying, the city pulsing with its own secrets. Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. The affair of the golden envelope was closed, its players scattered to their lives, their lessons learned. Sir Reginald and Lady Beatrice would rebuild, their bond tempered by truth. Dr. Carter would return to her excavations, her shame buried. Langston would chase his deals, perhaps with less recklessness. Clara would write her novel, her imagination chastened. Ramsay would drink, but perhaps with more restraint. Yet Poirot knew that another mystery awaited just beyond the horizon. The world was a place of disorder, of passions and secrets, and it was his calling to restore balance, one case at a time. He turned from the window, his cane tapping softly as he crossed to the desk. The tisane had cooled, but its aroma lingered, a reminder of the calm that followed the storm. Hercule Poirot was ready, as always, for the next challenge to his little grey cells. The end.